So before I get started, I want to remember all of the black individuals who have been killed unjustly, and just take a moment to remember their names and the fact that these are human beings, their brothers, their sisters, their sons, their daughters, husbands, wives, and friends, who were all killed and taken away from those who love them. George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Trayvon Martin, Eric Gardner, Philando Castile, Michael Brown, Sandra Bland, and countless others. We'd be here all day. Unfortunately, if we try to name every black individual who's lost their lives unjustly. And I think that's really important to keep in mind as we talk about a topic like this. These are real human beings who loved and were loved, and they lost their lives. And yeah, just let that sink in, like the gravity of that. You know, these are people. We're not talking abstractly about, political ideas, beliefs. At the end of the day, it boils down to the fact that these are people. While we do debate, these ideas around them, these are people who lost their lives. I also want to say, before I talk about this topic, I am in no ways an expert or 100% educated on everything here. I greatly apologize if I used the wrong terminology or am incorrect about something I say. I'm still trying to learn and be a better person myself, so please let me know if I get something wrong or my point of view is wrong in some way. I don't know how to start this video. If you live in America or anywhere in the world, you probably know about the recent murder of George Floyd and other black individuals, and how that has caused a lot of protests in the U.S. And I think whenever a black individual dies unjustly, people always talk about having a tough conversation or starting a dialogue. But it's never really concrete about what that is. I want to try and take a crack at that here today. So the first time I can remember something like this is the murder of Trayvon Martin. And I believe that was in 2012, and I was 14 at the time. And it was just on the news everywhere, on the front of every newspaper, just story about how this young black 17-year-old kid was just walking home from 7-Eleven and was murdered. And I just remember it was on the newspaper every day and reading about it. And yeah, it's crazy to think that he was just out going to 7-Eleven, not doing anything wrong, literally just walking home, and a man sees him, thinks he's suspicious, follows him, and Trayvon Martin ends up dead. And I remember that Trayvon's death spurred a lot of protests, and I think that might have been actually the origin of Black Lives Matter movement. And it's crazy to think that happened in 2012, and here we are in 2020, and things don't seem to have changed at all, which is really fucking frustrating and crazy to think about. And you might say in some ways we've fucking regressed with the election of Donald Trump and how fucking politicized this country is about issues that shouldn't be politicized. Like, for some reason, people really like to dig deep into these black and white issues of something that's clear as day, a man is murdered and they want to dig into the details and say, oh, but was he resisting arrest? Was he have a checkered background? Like all these bullshit things that are like ridiculous. And it's crazy to think that here we are, 2020, 8 years after the death of Trayvon Martin, and shit like this is still happening and people still don't understand. So, I don't know. It's really frustrating to think about, especially when I talk about it out loud. It's really frustrating. Let's talk about society today and why this is happening. I would venture to say that there are fewer explicitly racist individuals in our society than there were 50, 100 years ago. That much is, I think that's pretty obvious. People aren't explicitly racist, right? We don't have separate water fountains. I think a lot of people will like to claim that they're not racist. They treat black people the same as white people. And there's less explicit racism of the sort that you can easily call out or identify and say, point to a single action and say, that's wrong. Of course, we have fucking ridiculous situations like a police officer kneeling on a black man's neck, and that's explicitly racist. But I would say overall in society, there's less explicit racism. However, I think there is still a lot of covert racism in our society. What do I mean by covert racism? I think in our society, a lot of people will stereotype black individuals as thugs, as dangerous, as drug dealers, as uneducated. A lot of people will stereotype black people as these things, consciously or unconsciously, due to their upbringing. So that you have situations where if a white woman sees a black man in Central Park, she's more likely to call the cops on him than if she saw a white man in Central Park. And whether or not the people who have these stereotypes and subtly racist thoughts in their minds like to acknowledge it or not, and they like to say, I'm not racist, I love black people, I have black friends, whether or not they want to admit that they are covertly racist, it exists. We have systemic racism in our society where black people don't have access to as good education, healthcare, resources, jobs, you name it, they don't have as much access to as white people or other people in America. And there are countless reasons for this, but we have built a system where black individuals just cannot access the same opportunities as everyone else. And it seems like the game is stacked against them, because it is. We have a system in America that is broken and does not give an equal opportunity to everyone. A lot of people in our society have privilege where they don't have to worry about the things that other people might have to worry about. It's crazy to me to think that there are people who will like to judge everything the Black Lives Matter movement does because, they're not approaching this the right way. Meanwhile, they're in a very privileged position where they don't need to protest, and they've never had to think about protesting for their right to live, to breathe, to not get shot by the police. And I think that's important to remember. These people are out here protesting for their right to live and not be killed unjustly. And unless you know that feeling and know what it's like to be stereotyped for being black and have your life put in danger for that reason, I don't think you have any right to judge the protests or say that they're reacting inappropriately. Of course, I'm not condoning the violent riots and burning buildings and hurting people, but the majority of protests are not violent. 99% of the protests happening in America are very peaceful. And yet there are still white people on Twitter who really like to just go out there and judge them. I cannot fathom a 50-year-old white man being pinned to the ground the way George Floyd was, with 3 men on top of him holding him down. And do you want to know why that happened? It happened because they saw that his skin was black, and they assumed, hey, this is a big black guy, he's a threat, we have to pin him down and hold him down by the neck. White individuals who are accused of crime are treated very differently than black individuals who are accused of crime. Just in the everyday interactions, the statistics, the stories, you can go out there and do the research. Black individuals are handled much rougher, much worse, and they're more likely to die in interactions with police than white individuals. Even accounting for whatever you want to account for, black people more likely to die than white people when they interact with police. So when you take that into account, of course, black individuals are not going to trust the police, and that's going to lead to different interactions. I can understand why if you are a black individual and you see a police officer coming up to your car, you might be worried and anxious and nervous and act in a way that you might not otherwise do because you've seen other black individuals get murdered at routine traffic stops when they're not doing anything wrong. And this mistrust that is on both sides, I don't know. Well, I do know why. I do know why white officers act differently around black individuals. It's because they're afraid of them, and they have that covert racism in their mind where they think this individual is black, so he is more likely to be dangerous, more likely to hurt me than a white individual. And on the other side, you have a black individual who sees a police officer, sees all the news about police officers murdering black individuals, and is rightfully very nervous and very afraid. And that leads to a very combustible situation. And while I can understand why a black individual would feel anxious and afraid, that white officer, he should be trained, and he should act differently, and he should not let those stereotypes and emotions cloud his judgment. That is what he is trained to do. That is what his profession. And I see a lot of people giving excuses for white police officers who shoot black individuals and say, oh, but he was afraid. He was afraid for his life. He had only a split second to react, and he didn't know what was going to happen, and he feared for his life. That is a trained police officer. And if you cannot handle that danger, and you feel the need to kill people because you're afraid and you don't know how to react to interacting with a black individual who maybe is nervous that you're approaching him, guess what? You shouldn't be a fucking police officer, and you still fucking killed someone unjustly. Being afraid because of your own stereotypes about black individuals is no reason to kill one. As an Asian American myself, I feel a lot of privilege in my interactions, and I think about that sometimes, where I freely walk around at night. I feel free to wear a hoodie at night. I feel free to walk wherever I want, do whatever I want without fear of the police shooting me. I cannot imagine how scary life would be if I couldn't do something as simple as walk on the street at night without being afraid of being shot, or wear a hoodie without being afraid that someone will think I'm suspicious and shoot me. That is insane that we live in a country where some people can't fucking do that. So I do want to recognize my own privilege and bring that into perspective. Some people can't walk around at night without being afraid of being labeled as suspicious or dangerous, and being afraid that that might lead to a dangerous situation. So I want to talk about a situation in my own life where I've interacted with the police and the privilege I had in that interaction that some people don't have. So it was really late at night, maybe 3 a.m., and I was driving in this park on Long Island, and I was driving really slow because I had literally just gotten my license like 2 weeks before. I still had a piece of paper as my license because they hadn't mailed me my plastic license yet. So I was driving really slow in this park at like 3 a.m. and there was a car behind me. And I was driving way under the speed limit. So what I did was I thought to myself, okay, I'm going to pull over, let the person pass me, and then keep driving, right? I was very nervous about driving and being a nuisance to those behind me and keeping them from wherever I had to go. So I pulled over to the side to let the person pass. And then what happens? The lights go on that car, red and blue lights. Turns out that car is a police car. And it also pulls over right behind me. And at this moment, I'm thinking to myself, oh shit, this is not ideal. But I wasn't afraid or anything. The officer steps out of the car. She comes over to my window, asks for my license and registration. I give her my piece of paper. She reads it over. It's good. She says, what are you doing? I say, oh, sorry, I just want to pull over because I know I was driving slow and didn't want to hold you up. And she says, okay, cool, whatever. Hands me back my papers, gets back in her car, leaves. I really think my appearance and skin color and the fact that I'm Asian American led that situation to be really normal and really peaceful, right? She walked up to the window, saw skinny 18-year-old Asian kid, was like, oh, whatever. I really hate to think that if I was black in that situation, that could have turned out much differently. For one, I would have been much more afraid. I personally have never had bad interactions with police, right? But I realize a lot of that can be due to my privilege and the status that I have where I am an Asian American and we are, we're not treated as badly by police. Had I been black and there at 3 a.m., I would have been very afraid. It's crazy to think how the normal, mundane actions that we take for granted, the normal interactions that we have with the police that resolve normally, black individuals don't get to experience that because they have seen how the police treat people who look like them and they are afraid. And that just cannot be acceptable for us as a society. I also want to talk about the charge against George Floyd, which is ridiculous. So apparently what led to his arrest was that he tried to pay with a counterfeit $20 bill, which is so ridiculous that a black individual will get arrested for that. I have had fake $20 bills before. I've tried to deposit fake $20 bills at the bank before without even knowing it, right? I just get a $20 bill and change or whatever, and I don't check every single bill I use. I go to try to use it. They tell me, hey, this is fake, so you can't use it. And I'm like, oh, sorry. And I leave. It's crazy to me to think that George Floyd was arrested for something as inconsequential as this and detained and had a knee pressed into his neck all over, a fake $20 bill? Do you think a white person would have been treated that way over a fake $20 bill? I don't even know if the police would have shown up over a white person trying to use a fake $20 bill. It's ridiculous. And I also want to call out all the fucking bullshit that happens whenever a black individual is killed by the police. And people like to say, oh, he shouldn't have resisted arrest. Oh, he shouldn't have been selling whatever. He shouldn't have been doing this, been in this situation. That's ridiculous, man. That's fucking bullshit. And shut the fuck up about that, right? Since when in our society do we have the death penalty as punishment for every single fucking crime? Since when the fuck is that a fair and just way to do things? Especially before due process and court. Since when is it okay to just fucking publicly execute people? For what? An accusation of a crime? Since when is it okay to do that? Since when is it okay to see a black man jogging and think to yourself, hey, this might this might be someone who robbed a house. Might. We don't know for sure, but it might be. So let's just go fucking kill him. How fucking ridiculous is that? Is that there are people out there who are fucking defending situations like that? Who are fucking defending George Zimmerman and saying, oh, Trayvon Martin started the fight or some bullshit like that. Man, shut the fuck up with that shit, man. Like, that's so ridiculous that people will go out here and literally assassinate the character of these people who are dead, who are murdered by the police, and say, oh, they had a checkered background, they were in jail in the past, they did drugs, this, that. Man, shut the fuck up. Every fucking white kid in America fucking smokes weed, does illegal shit all the time, and they don't get any fucking consequences for that. No one gives a shit about that. And when a fucking black man dies, or a black woman dies, you want to dig up all this shit and say, oh, look, he was a bad person, and he resisted arrest, and, you know, you should never resisted arrest. It's like, man, it really makes you think, like, what kind of society do we want to live in, and how can we get there? And can these fucking dumbass idiots just shut the fuck up about, oh, he was a bad person? Man, so are fucking you with your bullshit coming out of your mouth. And I don't think you should die. I don't think being a bad person should be a death sentence. I don't think resisting arrest should be a death sentence. When in none of these cases even, it seems any of these people resisted arrest. And these people who like to be covertly racist, I think, are some of the most dangerous, because they will say things like, oh, I denounce people who do drugs. I denounce people who are lazy. And what they really mean by that is they're targeting a very specific segment of the population with that, black individuals. Because there are plenty of white individuals who do drugs and plenty of lazy white individuals that these people will not target. And these people will ignore the 99% of black individuals who are successful, do their job in society, pay their taxes, and are great citizens. And I think that's dangerous, because then that is much harder to root out than explicit racism, right? If someone in our society tried to use a racial slur against a black individual, that is a very easy thing to target and see with your own eyes and say, okay, that's a wrong action, and that person did that. So, boom, boom, that person is a bad person. I'm not going to associate with that racist person. A person who is very covertly racist and says things like, oh, look at these lazy individuals, look at these rioters burning these buildings. It's harder, because then there's no one thing you can point to, right? He didn't say, look at these black rioters, even though that's what this person means. I think we have to be very vigilant against covert racism in media that we consume, whether it be tweets, Facebook posts, Instagram posts, whatever, because it can affect the thinking of other people, and it perpetuates that systemic racism. So what is the solution, guys? There's no one solution. I have thoughts around it, though. I think one thing we have to keep in mind is that it's not enough to not say anything anymore, right? I think by not even trying and not starting a dialogue and not trying to even understand black individuals, if you're just ignoring the current events, then you are complicit in inaction. It is a privilege to be able to ignore these events and think to yourself, hey, tomorrow is going to be the same for me because I'm not going to get killed by police. Black individuals do not have that luxury where tomorrow can be the same as today. They need a change. And I think as a society, it is our duty to spur along that change, even if we are not black. It is our duty to do that. And if we stand by and just let this thing continue to happen and not do anything, then we are complicit in the murder of George Floyd. and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor and Trayvon Martin and Eric Gardner. We have to do something. So what is that something? I don't know. I'll say myself, I've been complicit in inaction myself. After Ahmaud Arbery was murdered, I read the news about it, I learned about it, but I didn't donate to anything. I didn't make an extra effort to help out. And that comes from a place of privilege on my part. And I really want to change that about myself. I think a lot of people need to wake up and see that inaction is no longer a viable course of action if you are a decent human being. Because we can't just let people die like this. So what do we do, right? Do we donate, sign petitions, make an Instagram story? What are we supposed to do, right? It feels like we're facing such a huge problem. And it feels like none of us can tackle it alone, right? And I will venture to say that's true. None of us can tackle it alone, right? None of us individually are going to solve this problem by individually donating to any cause or individually signing a petition, right? We're not going to be the thing that tips the scale. But it's sort of like how individually our votes don't matter, right? No election in history has been decided by one vote, right? But collectively, our votes do matter. And if no one voted, then, nothing would happen. And it's sort of a similar thing with this situation our society is in. No one donation, no one conversation is going to tip the scales. But if we all stand by and do nothing, then nothing's going to change. And we really can't allow that to continue. And I also think it's important for us to reflect on why we are becoming more aware. Are we doing it truly because we want to help Black individuals, or is it because we want to get guilt off our chests who are privileged? This is something I am thinking and reckoning a lot myself, right? Am I really doing this because I want to help and I care? Or do I just want people to think I'm a good person? And is just all just a show? I would really like to think I am making a sincere effort. But this is something I have to reckon with, right? And that comes from a place of privilege. I think we have to do more. And I'm not saying if you don't start a conversation, if you don't donate to this fund, you're not doing enough. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying we all have to make an effort to improve our society. So please make an effort to donate if you can. Make an effort to sign a petition. Make an effort to talk about this with someone. Because we have to. We can't let this continue. One more thing is, I think people who are not Black have to think about asking Black people, how can I help? That itself, when you do that, think about that. Like, we put Black individuals into a situation where they're in a really shitty situation, and we're also asking them to give us a solution so that we can get guilt off our chests. That's really not fair, and that's fucked up. So I think about why you're asking to help, and think about why you're helping. And this is something I'm thinking about, because I think it gets to a deeper issue, which is why did we think it was okay before to say nothing, and now we think it's time to speak up? Because the root of that is probably some privilege on our end where we were able to ignore what was happening. But we really can't allow that to continue, and we have to change. Thanks for listening, guys. I know this is a serious topic, but I think it's really important that we talk about these issues, and it's something that's been weighing on my mind a lot. This really can't go on. So do whatever you can. Think about how you can do better in your own life to improve the situation that our society has unfairly and unjustly placed Black individuals in. Because we have to do something. We have to. All right, guys. Hope everyone's doing well and staying safe. It's been a crazy year, but we'll get through this, guys. Stay safe. Stay sane. Peace.